Stop. In the next 5 seconds, I am going to give you something valuable, something school never tells you. History often begins stories at the moment of greatness. But real power is born much earlier. In fear, hunger, betrayal, and survival. Before the name Genghis Khan made the world tremble, there was a boy running across the frozen Mongolian steppe. Hunted not by enemies from distant lands, but by his own people. His name was Temujin. He was born into a world where loyalty lasted only as long as strength, and mercy was considered weakness. The Mongolian steppe was not a place that forgave mistakes. It was vast, open, and merciless. There were no walls to hide behind, no cities to retreat into. Only grass, wind, and the constant awareness that survival depended on dominance. Temujin's childhood did not begin with lessons or protection. It began with loss. His father, a minor tribal leader, was poisoned by rivals. And in the nomadic world of the steppe, death did not simply remove a man. It erased his family's protection. Almost overnight, Temujin's clan turned against him. The same people who once followed his father abandoned the family. Food was taken. Livestock was stolen. Shelter disappeared. The boy who was meant to inherit leadership was reduced to prey. This moment matters more than any battle Temujin would later fight. Because here, he learned the first law of power. Loyalty does not come from tradition. It comes from fear and necessity. Temujin and his family were forced to survive alone. They hunted small animals. They scavenged. They endured hunger so severe it reshaped their understanding of humanity. Childhood ended early. On the steppe, weakness was visible from a distance. And visibility meant death. Temujin learned to watch constantly. To read movement across the land. To anticipate betrayal before it arrived. These were not skills taught in war academies. They were learned through starvation. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Temujin was captured by a rival clan. Not defeated in battle. Simply seized, restrained, and reduced to property. He was enslaved. Bound, controlled, humiliated. For most people, this would have been the end of the story. But for Temujin, captivity became education. He observed power from the bottom. He learned how men ruled others. How fear was maintained. How obedience was enforced. He memorized routines, weaknesses, moments of carelessness. And one night, without drama or heroics, he escaped. No glorious confrontation. No final words. Just patience, timing, and silence. This escape marks the true beginning of Genghis Khan. Because from this moment on, Temujin no longer sought safety. He sought control. Returning to the steppe, Temujin began doing something unusual. Instead of clinging to bloodline or tradition, he gathered people based on loyalty earned, not inherited. On the steppe, this was revolutionary. Tribes had always followed ancestry. Temujin offered something different. Merit. If you were loyal, you were protected. If you were useful, you were rewarded. If you betrayed him, you were erased. Slowly, riders joined him. Not because he was noble, but because he was predictable. And predictability is stability in a violent world. But unity did not last without cost. As Temujin's influence grew, old alliances cracked. Brotherhood gave way to rivalry. Friends became threats. One of the most painful lessons came when his closest ally turned against him. This betrayal hardened Temujin permanently. From that moment forward, he accepted a second law of power. Authority cannot be shared. Those who stood beside him either followed him completely, or were destroyed. Through a series of brutal but calculated conflicts, Temujin eliminated rivals, absorbed their followers, and reshaped the political structure of the steppe. By the time he stood before a unified Mongol force, he was no longer just a survivor. He was a system. In a historic gathering, Temujin was declared Genghis Khan, universal ruler. But this was not a crown earned through ceremony. It was forged through survival, betrayal, and relentless control. And once unified, the Mongols did not look inward. They looked outward. What followed was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Genghis Khan transformed mobility into a weapon. His armies moved faster than information. Struck without warning. Vanished before retaliation. Cities that resisted were annihilated. Cities that surrendered were spared. This was not chaos. It was psychological warfare. Fear traveled ahead of Mongol armies, collapsing resistance before a single arrow was fired. Entire regions surrendered without battle. And with every conquest, the empire grew. From China to Central Asia. from Persia to Eastern Europe. The largest land empire in human history was built not on walls, but on speed, terror, and absolute discipline. Yet even as his empire expanded beyond imagination, Genghis Khan remained deeply private. His personal life was hidden, his movements secret, his death deliberately erased. When Genghis Khan finally died, the location of his grave was concealed. Those who buried him were said to have been killed to protect the secret. Even in death, control mattered. But empires do not die quietly. And as the Mongol Empire continued under his descendants, the world began to see the true cost of his legacy. Mass destruction, cultural collapse, and paradoxically, global connection. Trade routes reopened, knowledge spread, East met West. The world became smaller, because it had first been broken. If you're still watching at this point, pause for a moment. If you enjoy this kind of cinematic, uncompromising history, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Tell us what you think Genghis Khan truly was. A monster shaped by cruelty, or a survivor who mastered a brutal world. Because the story is not finished yet, what comes next is even darker. When Genghis Khan reached the height of his power, the world had already changed beyond recognition. Entire cities had vanished from maps. Borders that had existed for centuries were erased in a single generation. Empires that once considered themselves eternal collapsed in shock and disbelief. But inside the Mongol Empire, something different was happening. Unlike many conquerors before him, Genghis Khan did not rule through chaos alone. Beneath the violence was structure. Beneath the fear was order. He created laws that applied to everyone, including his own family. He promoted generals based on loyalty and ability, not noble blood. He punished betrayal without exception. This consistency mattered. It allowed an empire built through terror to function with precision. Messengers rode across continents faster than any system before them. Trade routes reopened under Mongol protection. Knowledge, technology, and culture flowed between East and West in ways the world had never seen. Ironically, one of history's most destructive forces also became one of its greatest connectors. But this balance was fragile, because the empire was built around one man, and that man was aging. Genghis Khan did not rule from a palace. He moved constantly. He remained close to the machinery of conquest. Even in later years, he continued to campaign, not out of necessity, but out of instinct. War had shaped him so completely that peace was no longer a natural state. Then, suddenly, the unstoppable slowed. Accounts of Genghis Khan's death are deliberately vague. Some say illness. Some say injury. Some say a fall from a horse. The truth was hidden by design. What matters is not how he died, but how carefully his death was erased. His burial was conducted in absolute secrecy. The procession left no trail. The grave was concealed so completely that it has never been found. Legend says those who buried him were killed to preserve the secret. Whether true or not, the message was clear. Even in death, Genghis Khan would not be claimed by history. But history cannot be silenced forever. After his death, the empire continued, for a time. His sons and grandsons expanded it further, pushing into Europe, the Middle East, and deeper into Asia. The Mongol Empire reached a scale no land-based empire would ever surpass. Yet cracks began to form. Without Genghis Khan's singular authority, unity weakened. Rivalries grew. Power fragmented. Over generations, the empire split into separate khanates, each powerful in its own right, but no longer unified. The system survived. The myth faded. And that is where judgment becomes complicated. Because Genghis Khan was not simply a destroyer. Yes, his campaigns killed millions. Yes, entire cultures were shattered. Yes, fear was used deliberately as a weapon. But he also dismantled rigid hierarchies that had kept power locked within elites. He opened trade across continents. He reshaped the global order in ways still felt today. The modern world exists partly because the old one was broken. And this leads to the most uncomfortable truth of all. Genghis Khan did not become a monster by choice. He was shaped by a world that rewarded brutality and punished mercy. The steppe taught him that weakness meant death. Betrayal taught him that trust was a liability. Survival taught him that control was the only safety. He did not invent cruelty. He mastered it. So how should history remember him? As a butcher who drowned civilizations in blood? Or as a survivor who understood his world so completely that he bent it to his will? The answer depends on where you stand. To those who lost everything, He is unforgivable. To those who lived under broken systems, he was a disruptor. To history itself, he is unavoidable. If you have stayed with this story until now, take a moment. If you value deep, cinematic history told without comfort or excuses, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Tell us what you believe. Was Genghis Khan a product of his time, or the man who reshaped time itself? Because his grave may be hidden, but his legacy is everywhere. From borders to trade routes, from genetics to global power structures, the hunted child became the ruler of the world. Not because he was destined, but because he learned faster, adapted harder, and accepted a truth others could not. In a brutal world, only the brutal survive. And Genghis Khan survived better than anyone in history.